Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just remark on how in awe I am of the bravery of Lieutenant Commander Elliott and Ms. Bopp for your testimony today, and also of my colleague, Senator McSally. Let me just start off by saying that I do agree that the military has shown that it has utterly failed at handling sexual assault through the UCMJ process. And I certainly do support removing sexual crimes out of the UCMJ process. But here's where I struggle. As a former commander of an assault helicopter company myself, there are crimes that I want to remain in control of for good order and discipline and the functioning of my unit. For example, violent assaults that are not sexual in nature, that have to do with racism, hate crimes, that sort of thing. And that's where my struggle is. And certainly our ranking member has been so kind in working with me, and we've been working on this for years. And Martha, you have as well, from our time in the House. And this is something we struggle, and when we, and I have to say, I still don't see the improvement in the UCMJ process in the military. And so I remain supportive of taking sexual crimes out, but I'm not sure that I'm there on all felony or even violent crimes. What I'd like to touch on here, though, is beyond the criminal convictions, which we're going to work on. You have a pledge that we will keep working on this. The criminal convictions do provide some sense of justice, but I still don't think it makes you whole. Not that you could ever be made whole again in the way you were before. But what is there that we can do to make the lives of survivors better? What more can we do for survivors to make sure that they have what they need to process and heal? And that includes stopping the retaliation. That includes letting you resume your careers and be successful in the careers that you dreamt about from the time that you entered the military. Could Colonel Herring, Colonel Christian, could you talk about that? And maybe the four of you could talk a little bit and touch on what would make it, and I hesitate to say better, but what else can be done?
Well, it's very controversial for some reason, but I say start by believing.
Yes.
There's from the survivors we talked to, protected offenders, survivors I talked to when I was active duty, it is very hurtful when they feel like their chain of command's not believing them and not supporting them. And so start by believing doesn't mean you're going to prosecute. Just start by believing means I accept that you have been through this traumatic event and I want to be there to help you. I think Congress has done a great deal to help survivors on the back end with the VA. Still ways to go on that, but the survivor community appreciates that. The other thing is just being able to flourish after this happens and understand that any survivor who's gone through trauma is going to have stumbles. And don't hold those stumbles against them to the degree that they're driven out, as the DODIG has shown. Give them that chance to thrive in the environment even after they've been assaulted.
Thank you. Colonel Herring?
Thank you. There have been a bunch of changes to try to assist victims, and I think the victims can speak more directly. We do see a lot of victims at SWAN, or we hear from a lot of victims, and one of the things they've asked for is an actual legitimate anonymous reporting mechanism, not the restricted versus the unrestricted reporting, but something similar to what has been developed and has been fielding on a number of university campuses and now is getting actually some widespread coverage. It's called it's Callisto. It's an anonymous reporting system or database where a victim can report their assault and their assailant, just put it into a database. And then what happens is they connect victims that have the same assailant, and they allow those victims to connect with each other, and then you're more likely, if you're not alone, if you have you've been assaulted by somebody that assaulted another person and now you've connected, you're more likely to come forward, you're more likely to be mutually supporting to each other. That's one idea that we have recommended to DOD, and I understand that this summer they may be fielding something similar for the very first time. It's a way for victims to tell their story, to unburden themselves in a certain way, and then potentially be connected to somebody else who was similarly assaulted by the exact same person.
Senator, excuse me, I think there's a couple ways to go about it. First of all, commanders need to be trained better to understand that every victim is different.
That's not you.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was me. Okay. Every victim is different. I wanted to go to work, Like, and that's, I've focused on work. I knew a victim on our ship, and she like got transferred off, and she needed a lot of time to process. The other thing is discussing our training. We've improved our training a lot, but I still don't think we address it appropriately. Like me, when I was going through this, I'm like, I'm an officer, I'm the third highest ranking person on the ship. This doesn't happen to me, this happens to these junior people. You know, the women are raped in our training, the men are grabbed, you know, body parts put on them. They're not raped. Why don't we address the problems? We're still not doing effective training.
Yes, so I believe just have more of a preventative before you even get to be a victim. And I think that that comes from a true understanding and going back to Senator McSally's comment about how do we change that culture. So I think that right now sexual assault is seen as a fear-based knowledge and it's not taken seriously. I personally, after graduating from the academy, did not believe in the sexual assault response program, just for many reasons. And it took a truly inspiring leader who I reported to. We had a candid discussion one day prior to my sexual assault even occurring, and the way that he was able to passionately stand up for women who he has experienced while he was in command. If we could put those leaders, identify them, truly incentivize them to become these advocates and not just randomly assign the role, but people who actually want to be there and want to be able to protect past, future, and every type of victim. I believe that that would help change the culture and having people stand up. We have signs that say stand up, speak up, see something, say something. And honestly, as a victim, being in the Army after a year while I was waiting for this trial, it was insulting to see these signs in the hallways, to see my victim advocate still posted even though it was not a good experience for me, and to see people draw mustaches on them. Sharp as a joke. We need true leaders to stand up and truly train what we need our soldiers to be expected of, hold them to the higher standard. Knowledge, teach them how psychologically to recognize these signs of predation. That was a really big for healing and for me, understanding what had happened to me, understanding the cycle of abuse, and if commanders could be able to recognize this abuse cycle instead of blaming the victim and instead of maybe even blaming the alleged, they're more knowledge and they have the power still. So.
Thank you. You've been very generous, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Senator Scott.